A man in his 30s is rushed to the hospital after getting hit by a truck. Despite the doctor's best efforts, his life seems to be fading quickly. As he is losing consciousness, he keeps hearing strange voices which he does not understand. Realizing that he is dying, he makes peace with it, stating how his life was over anyway, but he wishes he had at least been able to lose his virginity before death. Suddenly, those strange voices grow louder, and as he opens his eyes, he finds himself in an unfamiliar location. Instead of the emergency room staff, he is suddenly facing a young couple and their maid. Taken off guard by their behavior, he tries to reach out for the woman only to notice how tiny his hands have become. This makes him realize that he has just been reborn, although he kept all of his memories of his previous life. Catching on quickly, he learns that his new parents' names are Paul and Zenith, and they are in their 20s, which makes him think of them as kids, adding how jealous he is that they are making babies at that age. He learns that they have given him the name Rudius, and despite not being able to speak yet, he is able to get a grasp of the language they use rather quickly. While exploring the house, he starts playing with women's panties like a pervert, running into the maid Lilia while doing so. Thinking to himself how well-endowed she is, he cannot help but give her a lecherous-looking grin. This puts Lilia off, and she wonders if he is not possessed by an evil spirit, but not wanting to upset Zenith, she does not speak up about it. Looking out through the window, Rudius notices a completely different landscape than the one in Japan, so he figures he must be somewhere in rural Europe. Upset that they do not seem to have electricity or any form of modern technology, Rudius laments that he is not going to be able to play computer games. Just as he is thinking about that, he spots Paul in the yard practicing his swordsmanship. Paul's moves shock him and he stumbles backwards, falling off the window and hitting his head. Zenith quickly rushes to his side, and as she is checking on him, begins chanting an incantation. Rudius figures it is just something they do here to comfort kids that get hurt, so he gets really shocked when the incantation is finished and a magical healing spell envelops his body. This makes him realize that he is not in fact in Europe or even Earth, but he has been reincarnated into another world, a world of sword and sorcery. Excited by the prospect of magic, he decides that he will try his hand at it as soon as possible. Thanks to Paul reading him storybooks, it does not take long for Rudius to get the hang of it and learn to speak and read on his own. Deciding to keep the fact that he is a reincarnation to himself, he does not reveal anything and embraces his fresh start at life as Rudius. Armed with the ability to read this new script, he delves into the books he found inside the house, one of which happens to be a book on magic. From the book, he learns the basics of how magic works and recites an incantation, which causes him to create a ball of water. On his second attempt, he closes his eyes and focuses on how casting the spell made him feel. Much to his surprise, this results in him creating the ball of water without an incantation. But with the second spell cast in a row, he runs out of mana and collapses, making the ball of water fall onto him. This makes Zenith and Lilia think he had fallen asleep and wet himself, since they do not know that he can already read, let alone cast spells. Time passes and Rudius continues to practice magic in secret, discovering that the amount of mana he holds expands as he is using it and growing older. However, the book he has does not mention the possibility of casting spells without incantation, so that makes him think he might be in some way special. After some time, he manages to completely master that beginner spell. Satisfied with his progress, he decides to try out an intermediate-level incantation from the book. Before he even realizes what is going on, the potency of the magic he invokes blasts a hole in the house as it flies into the distance. Everyone quickly rushes in to check on Rudius, worried that a monster had attacked. But once they find him next to the hole with the book of spells next to him, Zenith realizes that he must have read an incantation from it. Rudius confesses, and Zenith becomes overjoyed at how talented he is to be able to cast spells at such an early age. She immediately wants him to continue along the path of a mage, but Paul wants to teach him the way of the sword instead. The two of them start arguing, but Lilia helps them reach a compromise, suggesting that Rudius should simply learn both. Agreeing to that idea, they decide to hire a tutor for Rudius who will be able to properly teach him the ways of magic. The tutor arrives on a short notice, but much to everyone's surprise, is not an elderly wizard, but a rather young-looking girl with long blue hair. She introduces herself as Roxy and wonders who is to be her new student. Once she is told that Rudius is the student in question, Roxy loses heart, thinking how he is way too young to grasp the concept of magic, and that his parents have no idea what they are doing. Her awkwardness resounds with Rudius, who immediately takes a liking to her. Zenith is quick to point out that Rudius is special, so she should not worry about it, and just start tutoring him. Begrudgingly, Roxy decides to give it a shot and takes Rudius to the backyard, where she starts to explain the theory of magic to him. However, Rudius has a hard time focusing outside as he was a complete shut-in who never left his house, so he starts to nervously fidget. Seeing this, Roxy thinks he is just not able to understand, so she moves on to more practical teachings and shows him how she creates and fires a water ball of her own. Her water ball is quite potent and it cuts down a young, still growing tree. Rudius points out that his mother will be quite upset if the garden gets damaged like this. Realizing that she made a mistake, Roxy quickly rushes to mend the tree, displaying her proficiency with healing magic as well. Next is Rudius' turn to show what he can do, but seeing that Roxy is also using incantations for all of her magic, he decides to play it safe and recite the incantation as well until he learns more about it. However, just as he is mid-reciting the incantation, he gets distracted by Roxy's panties being on full display thanks to a strong gust of wind. That causes him to cut the incantation short but still fire off the spell. Surprised, Roxy wonders if he always cuts the incantations short. Rudius confesses that he actually always omits the incantations instead. Hearing that, Roxy is left completely in shock, stating how Rudius will indeed be someone worth teaching. They are suddenly interrupted by Zenith's scream. As it turns out, the water ball fired by Rudius has cut down the tree again, and she just arrived to see it fall over. Worried that this will cause her to get fired, Roxy gets into a bad mood, but Rudius cheers her up by taking responsibility for what happened and using a cheesy line from an eroge he played in his previous life. The line seems to work and Roxy is back in good spirits, happily surprised by the unexpectedly warm welcome by Rudius' parents. They celebrate Roxy's arrival with a lavish dinner, and during the dinner, Rudius promises to himself that he will not waste this second chance at life and do his best this time around. Rudius remembers how his parents suddenly passed away in his previous life, and he was not even attending their funreal, instead staying cooped up in his room. His younger brothers then attacked him and threw him out of the house, disgusted by his lifestyle. While wandering around aimlessly, he spots some high schoolers arguing on the street. They do not notice a truck approaching them at high speed, which seems to be swerving left and right. Rudius, however, spots it and tries to warn them, but being too anxious to yell out, he has no choice but to run to them and try to push them out of the way. It is then that the truck hit him. Suddenly, he wakes back up in his new life, realizing that he must have ran out of mana and fallen asleep while creating some figurines by using earth magic. He hears his new parents in their room trying hard to conceive another baby. Thinking he could embarrass them a little, he decides to go to their room, but suddenly stops when he spots Roxy listening into them just outside of their room and exploring herself. Rudius changes his mind and decides to call it a day, treasuring what he just saw. 6 months have passed since Roxy arrived, and Rudius' magic studies are coming along nicely, allowing him to use up to intermediate level magic with no issues. During one of her lessons, she tells him about demons and spirits who also inhabit this world, revealing that she is in fact a demon. And that was the real reason why Paul and Zenith were so surprised when they saw her. Roxy tells him about a very dangerous race of demons called the Supered. About 4 or 5 centuries ago, a massive war between humans and demons called the Laplace War took place. During that war, the Supered went on a rampage and slaughtered friend and foe alike, even women and children who did not participate in the battles. So she warns him to never approach anyone who has emerald green hair and a red gem on their forehead, as they are a Supered and are likely to kill his entire family. Another 6 months later, Rudius has become so adept at using magic that he never runs out of mana anymore. On the other hand, his lessons with the sword are not making any progress whatsoever. Roxy tells him that there is a magic university in a country called Ranoa, and it is the best magic school in the entire world. She hopes that he will decide to attend that university one day, as he can learn a lot more there. But thinking about going to school makes Rudius anxious, so he states how she is the only teacher he will ever need. But Roxy is convinced that he will easily surpass her before long, and there is not much she can still teach him. She is also dejected by the fact that no matter how hard she tries, she cannot cast spells without incantations like Rudius can. 6 more months pass, and it is time for Rudius' 5th birthday. In this world, they make a big celebration every 5 years instead of every year, so he is showered with gifts. He gets a sword from Paul, a book on magic from Zenith, and Roxy gives him a magical wand which enhances his spellcasting capabilities. It is during his birthday celebration that Roxy announces it is time for his graduation exam, which will take place the next day. Hearing that makes Rudius anxious, as it brings back traumatic memories from school and his past life. The next day comes and they need to leave the premises of his home, as the magic they will cast is likely to harm people and the crops growing nearby. Rudius refuses to leave, too scared due to the trauma he has, but Roxy picks him up on the horse with her, reassuring him that she will keep him safe. After all, she thinks that he is either scared of monsters or the horse. Despite Rudius' protests, they make their way toward an open field, not too far from the town. On the way there, they pass by many villagers, and although Rudius first thinks they are all staring at him and making fun of him, he quickly realizes that they are actually just saying hi to Roxy, who has become a valued member of the community in the 1.5 years she has lived here. This helps him snap out of the trauma and finally relax. Even though it was just a simple act of leaving the house and go outside, it was something he could not do on his own, and he becomes eternally grateful to Roxy for pushing him to break free of his fear. Arriving at the open field, Roxy starts to perform her most powerful water magic spell, telling Rudius to observe and memorize it as she can only cast it once. The powerful spell creates a massive storm in the surrounding area, and Rudius is almost swept away by the wind. Once she has done it, it is Rudius' turn, and he decides to give it his best, determined to show Roxy how well she taught him. He casts the spell with absolute perfection, even beating Roxy with its potency. With that, Roxy is yet again left shocked by how talented he is. She congratulates him on passing the exam and declares that there is nothing left for her to teach him. Despite Rudius wanting her to stay, Roxy has decided to move on and work on her own magic, as watching Rudius grow has made her feel inferior, so she wants to try and improve some more. Although Rudius does not tell her about the trauma she helped him break free of, he remains truly grateful to her. Before she leaves, she gives him her necklace, which happens to be the symbol of her demon tribe, and Rudius promises to take good care of it. However, just as she leaves, it turns out that Rudius has kept another one of Roxy's belongings, namely her panties, which she stole if they get discovered by Lilia. Thanks to Roxy, Rudius is finally able to leave his home and play outside, so Zenith and Paul get surprised when he decides to play out in the fields. As he is exploring the village outskirts, he happens upon 3 village kids bullying a 4th one. This triggers his memories of bullies that traumatized him in his past life, and he decides to step in. Using his water magic, he manages to annoy them enough that they leave the kid they were bullying alone. Reaching out to the bullied kid, Rudius finds out that he is very frightened, but also very cute, believing that he will become quite a handsome man in the future. As he is using water magic to wash off the dirt from the kid, he is startled to see emerald green hair on the boy. Worried that the boy might be a supered, he checks for the red gem on his forehead but finds none. Feeling relieved, Rudius cannot help but wonder if the boy is a demon like Roxy, but the boy does not know, explaining that his father is a half-elf, but he has different hair than anyone in his family, and that is why all the bullies in town pick on him. Deciding to stick by his side, Rudius tells him that they will be friends from now on. Just as they are properly introducing themselves to each other, a gust of wind makes the boy stutter, making Rudius think that his name is Self. But Slife does nothing to correct this misunderstanding. Self becomes interested in the magic that Rudius is using, so he asks him to teach him how to do it as well. Rudius happily accepts the request and promises to teach him. Returning home, Rudius is confronted by Paul, who is extremely upset at him. It turns out that the mother of one of the bullies he confronted has come to complain, stating how he beat up her kid. Paul does not want to listen to Rudius' side of the story and insists that he must apologize and be better, but Rudius knows he is not in the wrong here, and submitting to Paul's demand would do neither of them any good, so he stands his ground and provokes Paul into hitting him. Paul gets distraught by the direction of his lecture vent and starts feeling really bad when Rudius demonstrates his ability to manipulate the conversation, guilt-tripping Paul into relenting and listening to Rudius' explanation. Thanks to that, they are able to smooth things over, but Paul still regrets being so harsh and stubborn at the start, remembering how a fallout with his father caused him to leave his family behind, and how Rudius might do the same if he does not shape up and become a better father. Time passes, and Rudius and Sylph are spending almost every day together. Sylph is very interested in learning how to cast spells without incantations, just like Rudius. Somewhat reluctantly, Rudius also decides to try and teach him how he does it. Hoping that this is a unique skill he has in this world, he is a little bit disappointed when he sees Sylph pulling it off without too much trouble as well. They get caught by a sudden downpour while playing out on the field, so they rush to Rudius' home to change their clothes and warm up. Lilia has already prepared a hot bath, and Rudius quickly takes Sylph there so they can wash together. Without any shame, he strips in front of him, but Sylph becomes extremely embarrassed. Confused as to why another boy would be so ashamed of bathing together, Rudius tricks Sylph and forcefully strips him down. Suddenly, he is left speechless, realizing that Sylph is not a boy at all, and actually a girl, Sylphie, as she covers herself and starts crying. Hearing the commotion, Paul comes in to check what has happened and is quite surprised by the scene. Instead of getting angry and unwilling to listen like last time, he separates the two and has Rudius explain himself properly in a calm manner. Rudius is very apologetic for what he had done, elaborating that he was only worried that Sylphie would catch a cold and did not mean anything bad by what he did. After Rudius promises that he will never do anything like that again, Paul has him go to Sylphie and apologize to her directly. It is there that Rudius reveals to everyone how he thought that Sylphie was a boy this entire time, which only makes her cry once again and has Paul wonder if Rudius is not a bit dense in that regard. After that, things get awkward between Rudius and Sylphie. which weighs heavily upon him. Seeing that, Paul decides to give him some advice on how to make up with women. Listening to his father's advice, he manages to talk to her once again, and despite being very awkward, Sylphie also wants things to return to what they were before the incident, so the two of them are able to patch things up. Although happy that they are friends again, Paul wonders why he is teaching Rudius how to handle girls at such a young age. Wonderful news brighten up the household as Zenith becomes pregnant with another child. The joy is quickly disrupted by the news that Lilia is also pregnant. Paul quickly takes responsibility and declares that it is probably his child. The reaction from Zenith is as one would expect, and the sudden wedge threatens to split apart the family. Zenith questions Lilia about what she intends to do now, and she explains that she will assist Zenith with childbirth and then take her to leave. She intends to return to her homeland and raise the child there on her own. However, it is winter and the journey to her homeland would take a month. Rudius quickly realizes that an exhausted mother with a newborn child cannot survive that journey. Paul attempts to offer some alternative solutions, but Zenith will not listen to a word he is saying. Rudius does not want Lilia and the unborn baby to meet such a cruel fate, especially since Lilia was always kind to him. Even though she keeps a wary distance from him, she did not reveal the stolen panties from Roxy to anyone else and kept his secret safe. It is then that Rubius decides to use his argumentative skills to help her out. Pleading with Zenith, he does his best to make Paul be the only one to blame, turning Lilia into the victim of the situation. This, in addition to his desire for Lilia to stay with them, manages to convince Zenith to relent. She then accepts Lilia as another member of the family and forbids her from leaving on her own in that state, but then it is Paul who takes the blame for everything. He is scared of what he will have to do for Zenith to make up for his mistake, but also relieved that Lilia is not sent away to her death. Lilia is overcome by emotion with that outcome, changing her mind about Rudius. She clearly felt that she was at fault for what happened, and that Rudius chose to forgive her and direct the conversation so that she would be spared. In light of that, she opens up more to Rudius and starts talking with him, while promising to raise the child so that it will serve Rudius as a way to repay him for saving the both of them. Time passes and both babies are born as healthy girls. Zenith's child is named Norn and Lilia's Aisha. Seeing them, Rudius becomes determined to be the figure of a cool elder brother to them. While Sylphie is catching up to him quickly, Rudius' magic abilities did not develop much lately. Because of that, Rudius considers enlisting in the magic university that Roxy told him about, but as soon as he mentions that to Sylphie, she starts crying and begs him to stay by her side instead. Seeing how deeply she cares for him and needs him, Rudius decides to settle for a simple life with her instead. But suddenly, he gets a letter from Roxy, who is happy to announce that she has been able to improve her skills thanks to her efforts and is now tutoring a prince in Chiron Kingdom. Not wanting to disappoint Roxy, Rudius comes up with an idea and brings it up with Paul during dinner. He mentions that his skills have been stagnating, so he would like to enlist in Ranoa's magic university together with Sylphie. But Paul forbids it, stating that he is too young to go there for now, not to mention that he is still training the way of the sword, and that the tuition fee for both of them would be insanely high, which is not something he can just afford. But Rudius was expecting a negative response, so he has an alternative suggestion ready. Namely, he wants Paul to find him a well-paid job that he can do, and by the time he has earned enough money for the tuition fee, he will be old enough to go to the university with Sylphie. Seeing how determined he is to achieve that goal, Paul promises to see what he can do about it. One day, while Paul is training Rudius with the sword, a carriage suddenly arrives at their home and a muscular cat-like beast person comes out of it. Paul recognizes her as Kislane and wonders if everything is ready. After she confirms that it is, Zenith and Lilia come to say their farewells to Rudius. Not understanding what is going on, Rudius wonders why everyone is acting that way. Instead of answering, Paul asks him how he would respond if he was told to stay away from Sylphie. Rudius quickly states how he would not want that, to which Paul sighs and immediately attacks him. Caught off guard, Rudius manages to use magic to defend himself, but his skills are nowhere near Paul's level and gets knocked out in the blink of an eye. Once he regains his senses, he finds himself riding in the carriage together with Kislane, headed for an unknown destination. After they introduce themselves to each other, she hands him his father's letter. Reading the letter, Rudius learns that Paul found a job for him where he will tutor a 9-year-old lady in Ro. In addition to her, he will also tutor Ghislaine, who will in return train him in swordplay in Paul's stead. He is to stay there and tutor them for the next 5 years, during which time he is forbidden from contacting Sylphie, as Paul has found that the two of them have become too dependent on each other, which is not good for their growth. Rudius understands where Paul is coming from, but still laments the fact that he will not be able to see her at least once a year. Arriving at the lady's mansion, Rudius sees that all of the staff are beast folk. There he meets the lord of the house, who is also the mayor of the city, Philip. He also happens to be Paul's cousin, making them related. Philip quickly explains that he is to tutor his daughter, Eris, but that none of the tutors he has hired thus far have been able to put up with her. So he has no expectations from Rudius, but he will let him try since he is Pulse's son. Upon meeting Eris, Rudius immediately gets the impression that she is very intense, not to mention violent, as she immediately initiates a fight and starts beating him up when he stands up against her arrogant disposition. After successfully running away from her, Rudius returns to Philip, who wonders if he is ready to give up. But instead of giving up, Rudius decides to stay and give the tutoring a try, as coming back so quickly would only embarrass him in front of Paul. Philip is at a wit's end on how to make Eris willing to study, so Rudius comes up with an idea to show her the value of studying magic, language, and math. He discloses the full plan to Philip, who agrees to it. Going to sleep, Rudius prays that everything will turn out all right. Waking up, Rudius finds himself tied up in some sort of dungeon, with his hands and feet tied up and Eris right next to him. It turns out that the plan was to get both of them kidnapped by paid actors, allowing Rudius to show Eris the importance of learning. After using magic to free them from their bonds, Eris immediately starts shouting for Ghislaine to come help her. But instead of her, one of the kidnappers makes his way into the dungeon. Rudius notices that something is not according to plan when the kidnapper begins to ruthlessly beat up Eris for being too loud and talking back to him. Once the kidnapper is done brutalizing Eris, he leaves the two of them alone and locks up the dungeon once more, warning them to stay silent. Rudius quickly uses some healing magic on Eris, but does not heal her completely, as she would only start shouting again. Listening into the kidnappers, Rudius is more than convinced that this is in fact a real kidnapping, but still decides to stick to the plan and try to teach Eris a lesson. He uses some more magic to remove the grates from the dungeon window and proceeds to climb out of it, not helping Eris out until she promises that she will listen to him and not yell or try to fight until they are back home. She agrees, and they manage to get out just before the kidnappers burst into the dungeon again. Since Rudius can read, he manages to find a carriage ride back to Row, showing her the importance of getting educated. Once they are back in Row, they stumble upon one of the servants from Philip's manor. Dropping their guard, they approach him. At that moment, the kidnappers strike again, snatching Eris and running off with her. Rudius gives chase and prevents them from escaping with his magic. Instead of helping them, the servant from the manor reveals to be working together with the kidnappers and is in fact the one behind the kidnapping, as he wants to pay back Eris for all the torment she subjected him to. He tries to reason with Rudius, telling him to join them, and he will even get paid more than enough money to cover the tuition costs of the Magic University. However, Rudius does not want to abandon Eris and stays true to his promise, firing a large explosion into the air in order to attract attention to them. A quick fight breaks out, and Rudius quickly takes out one of the kidnappers, retrieving Eris from him, but the second one proves to be very skilled with the sword. Getting through the spells Rudius casts at him, the kidnapper throws his sword at him with deadly precision. But just before the sword hits Rudius, Ghislaine arrives, attracted by the sudden explosion. She easily shatters the flying sword before cutting down the two kidnappers in the blink of an eye, showcasing just how skilled with the blade she is. Not knowing what is going on, she questions Rudius, but he is too shaken up by the sight of all the blood coming from the kidnappers to respond. The servant from the manor tries to explain himself, but is quickly taken into custody by her. Returning to the mansion, Philip is there to greet them and is shocked to see Eris in that state. Wondering what happened, he confronts Rudius, but quickly catches on when he sees the servant captured by Ghislaine, ordering her to take him away. Still shaken up by the fact that he almost died back there were it not for Ghislaine, Rudius believes that he has completely failed in his attempt to convince Eris, but just as he turns to leave, she reveals that she in fact wants him to stay and tutor her after all. The following day, Philip explains that Ghislaine will be officially taking all the credit for rescuing Eris from the kidnappers in order to avoid any political troubles. Rudius also gets to meet Philip's wife, Hilda, and his father, the Lord of Soros. Rudius can quickly tell that Eris is taken after her grandfather, as her demeanor is exactly the same as his, brutish and commanding. Soros asks Rudius on Eris' behalf to teach her magic, explaining that she was awestruck by all the amazing spells he cast last night. But Rudius suggests that it would be good for her to ask him on her own, as she might become too proud to properly ask people for things she needs in the future. Soros agrees and summons Eris to ask Rudius directly. It is then that Rudius learns just how obsessed this family is with beast folk, as she assumes a pleading pose imitating a beast person as a way to ask him for something properly. Despite that, Rudius agrees and starts tutoring her and Ghislaine in the ways of magic, mathematics, reading, and writing. Eris and Rudius also train their swordplay under Ghislaine. While Eris is enthusiastic about learning magic and makes steady progress in the field, she is very reluctant to learn anything else, storming off and hiding from him every time a lesson not related to magic comes up. One of these times, Rudius finds her as she is sleeping while hiding from her daily lessons. He decides to play a prank on her and steal her panties as punishment, but she wakes up while he is removing them and clobbers him instead. Seeing that he cannot get her to study anything but magic, Rudius resorts to Ghislaine for help, hoping that she can come up with a way to captivate Eris. Ghislaine agrees to help and tells Eris a story about her time as adventurer, revealing that she was in the same party as Paul and Zenith. But once the two of them left to settle down, she was forced to handle her finances on her own, but as she has no clue how to do it, she was often left without coin and forced to eat monster poop to survive. Surprisingly, this story was enough to give Eris some motivation to study other things than magic, much to Rudius' relief. On the other hand, while Rudius is getting somewhat better with the sword, he is no match for Eris and always gets beat up during their training. Eris' motivation to study does not last long, and Rudius realizes that she needs a day off from studying to not get stressed out as much. To make use of their day off, Rudius heads out into the town together with her and Ghislaine. There he teaches them about managing their money on the marketplace so they could do market research on their own and find the best prices for the stuff they are trying to buy. Noticing that Eris does not have a good grasp on monetary value, as her grandfather buys anything she wants for her, he forbids her from buying things with money that is not hers and decides to ask Philip to grant her an allowance instead. On their way back to the manor, Rudius is shocked to see a flying fortress far in the sky. Ghislaine explains that this is Perugia's fortress. Seeing that Rudius does not know who Perugius is, Eris tells him that he is one of the 3 heroes who beat the demon Godlawplace who tried to wipe out humanity. Rudius remembers this from the stories that Paul used to read to him as a baby and figures he would like to go there one day to check it out himself. While Eris is making great progress with her swordsmanship, Rudius seems to have no talent for it whatsoever, and the difference between their skill only keeps increasing. Just as he is finished working on a figurine of Roxy that he created with magic, Eris' dance instructor comes to visit him, asking him to allow her to borrow Eris from his studies so she could learn how to properly dance for her birthday party, which is coming up. Rudius happily accepts the request and decides to invest the newly found free time into learning new languages, specifically the Beast God, Battle God, and Demon God tongues. While he has Ghislaine to help out with the Beast God language and the Battle God is very similar to the human one, Rudius hits a wall with the Demon God tongue, unable to wrap his head around it. So he decides to send Roxy a letter, checking in on her and telling her about his endeavor. Just as he is done sending the letter, he gets startled by Eris storming off from her dance lessons. Checking in with her instructor, Rudius learns that she is having a hard time teaching Eris how to properly dance, and she fears that Eris will embarrass herself on her birthday at this rate. Deciding to help out, Rudius goes after Eris and convinces her to keep trying and learn the dance, where she might end up regretting it later in her life. His words manage to get through to her, and she decides to give it another go, as long as Rudius will be there to help her. He agrees, and the two of them start taking dancing lessons together, but it becomes evident that Eris struggles with maintaining any sort of rhythm. During his free time, Rudius manages to sell the figurine of Roxy, which earns him quite a bit of coin. Days pass, and she is slowly improving, but dancing appears to be something she is not too comfortable with. Rudius receives a response letter from Roxy where she tells him how she is doing and sends a textbook about the demon god language which she wrote herself, hoping it will serve him well in his endeavor to learn her native tongue. She also mentions that the prince acquired a figurine which resembles her in terrifying accuracy. Thanks to Roxy's textbook, Rudius is finally able to make progress on the demon god language. On the other hand, Eris' 10th birthday is right around the corner and she is just barely able to execute some dance moves. Rudius is worried as she seems to be only able to dance with him as her partner. The time for her birthday party comes and all the important nobles and their families are attending. Soros starts the celebration by declaring that anyone who wishes to gain his favor must dance with his granddaughter. One of the noble's sons immediately steps forward and asks for her hand in dance, but it turns out to be a disaster as Eris is unable to follow the rhythm and makes them fall over at the start. Seeing how things are turning out, Rudius steps in and tries to salvage her special day. By taking her hand for a dance, he attempts to repeat what they practiced over the last weeks. However, he soon learns that Eris is too nervous with all the people watching. Thinking fast, he tells her to close her eyes and instead move her feet as if she was in combat every time he gives her a signal. Eris listens, and thanks to that brilliant idea, they are able to finish the dance rather beautifully, getting a loud applause from everyone as a reward. This performance has given Rudius quite some attention from the young daughters of nobles who immediately get interested into him, but Eris gets jealous and steals him away to prevent him from mingling with them. After the party is over, Rudius gives Eris and Ghislaine wands imbued with magic stones as a token of them successfully mastering beginner magic. Now expecting a birthday gift from Ghislaine as well, Eris looks at her expectingly. Caught unprepared, Kislane decides to give her one of her rings, stating how this one is supposed to protect her from falling prey to wild wolves. In the morning, Rudius wakes up first and notices Eris next to him. Just as he is about to pull a perverted prank on her, he spots the ring on her finger and chooses to give it a pass this time, thinking how the ring might work after all. Taking a walk outside, he notices strange sounds coming from the nearby tower. Checking it out, he finds Sora's going at it with one of the beast folk maids. He notices Rubius arriving and wraps it up, making the maid run away in embarrassment. Calling him to come over, he shows him something strange that suddenly appeared in the sky. It's a red sphere of unknown origin or purpose, and when Rudius wonders what it means, Soros tells him that he thinks it is something good, as believing otherwise would be quite stressful. 2 years pass and things are coming along nicely for Rudius. He's getting fluent in the languages he is learning and the tutoring job is going smoothly. The strange red sphere in the sky has increased in size but has otherwise remained inert. One day, Rudius catches wind of something going on behind his back. Sneakily listening in on what the others are talking about, he finds out that they are planning for his 10th birthday party. Due to the political struggles within the family, Rudius cannot get a big public party like Eris did, but they still want him to celebrate so he does not feel left out. This touches him and he decides to pretend he did not hear anything about it. The time for his birthday celebration comes and Kislane is in charge of keeping him distracted while they get everything ready. Rudius figures it out and decides to tease her, to see how far she is willing to go to prevent him from ruining the surprise. To do so, he asks her to show him the base of her tail, as he wants to finish a figurine of her, and does not know exactly how that part of her body looks. Much to his surprise, she is more than okay with sticking her rear out for him. As he is admiring her muscular behind, they get interrupted by a maid who came to fetch Rudius. As soon as they arrive at the main hall, the surprise birthday party is revealed and Rudius feigns being caught off guard by it. It turns out that everyone from the mansion has come to make sure Rudius has a wonderful birthday. They even invited his parents to come, but they were unable to do so due to the sudden increase in monster activity in the area, which is keeping Paul very busy. Eris hands him his birthday present, which is an exquisite, priceless staff that he can use for his spellcasting. Rudius thanks them for the gift and has a wonderful rest of the day partying with everyone. Once the night falls, he returns to his room only to find Eris there in her nightgown. She states that she wants to make sure he does not feel lonely on his special day, so she wants to spend the night with him. Rudius warns her that he might do something perverted if she stays there, but instead of reprimanding him for saying that, she says is fine as long as it is just a little bit. Hearing her give him the go-ahead, Rudius is unable to hold himself back and starts feeling her up. Although she is okay with it for a little bit, she quickly puts an end to it when he pushes it too far, giving him one of her usual beatings before storming off. Realizing he went too far, Rudius immediately regrets his actions, but before he can even get up to go and apologize, Eris returns to his room. He quickly apologizes for what he did and Eris forgives him, telling him to wait with that sort of thing until he becomes a proper adult, before wishing him a good night and leaving. Hearing those words makes Rudius overjoyed, but thinking of how many years he still has to wait for it makes him remember Sylphie. Meanwhile, back in his hometown, Paul is busy slaughtering monsters that have started getting more aggressive. Sylphie has made a present for Rudius' 10th birthday, so she passes it over to Lilia to make sure he gets it. Norn and Aisha are growing up quickly and Aisha has already started doing chores around the house, much like her mother. When Paul returns home, they all gather by the window, noticing a strange, ominous-looking cloud hanging above in the distance. Roxy also spots the same disturbance in the distance and realizes that it is coming from the same location where Rudius is. To show them what he can do with a new staff, Rudius brings Eris and Kislane away from the city so he can cast his most powerful spell. But just as he starts the chant, he realizes that something is off as the sky around the red sphere changes drastically. Explaining to the girls that this is not his doing, he wonders what is going on. Suddenly, he is attacked by a masked stranger and Kislane jumps in to protect him. She fends off the attacker, who introduces himself as Almanfi, who has come here by the order of Perugius to investigate the disturbance in mana. Hearing that, Kislane explains that they have nothing to do with it, staking her title as the Sword King to give her statement some weight. Hearing that, Almanfi backs down, promising he will hunt them down if her words turn out to be false. Before any more words can be shared between them, the red sphere above them explodes into a massive wave of mana that spreads through the entire area. Almanfi teleports away immediately to avoid it, but the rest of them cannot get away that quickly. Seeing that Eris is unable to run from shock, Rudius hugs her to protect her as much as possible as the bright light envelops them. Rudius regains his senses in a strange place where nothing exists but a thick fog. Much to his surprise, he is back in his old body, so he believes that he has died and it is all over. A strange humanoid figure without any discernible features appears before him, introducing itself as the man-god. Rudius gets upset at the god for the way he is trying to weasel his way to get Rudius to trust him, and he even snaps at the god for baiting him with such a wonderful dream of a new world, only to take it away before it actually gets good. The man god realizes what Rudius is thinking and reassures him that the world he lived those 10 years in is not fake, and that his body is in fact completely fine. Instead, this current location is in his head, and the body he has right now is just his own mental projection of himself. When he wakes up, he will once again be Rudius. Hearing that calms Rudius down immediately, and he wonders what exactly the man god wants from him. The man god explains that he finds Rudius interesting, so he is keeping an eye on him, and he would like to gain his trust by giving him some helpful advice. Deciding that he will consider trusting the man god if the advice is good, Rudius agrees to listen to it. Happy with the response, the man god explains how he was caught up in a mana disaster which teleported him all the way to the demon continent. Once he wakes up, he will find a man nearby. He must trust this man and help him on his mission. Upon saying that, the man god disappears and Rudius is suddenly woken up. He finds himself next to a lit campfire and immediately inspects his body for any injuries. Realizing that he is fine, he looks around, spotting Eris fast asleep next to him. But instead of Kislane, the third person next to them is a strange man with emerald green hair and a red gem on his forehead, a Superd. Caught off guard, Rudius scrambles to get ready for a fight, but quickly calms down when he realizes that the man means them no harm. Using his knowledge of the demon god language, he asks the man if God had sent him, but the man responds in the human tongue, stating how he just saw them falling out of the sky and decided to help them by protecting them and building a campfire for them. Since human children are fragile, the Superd is left dumbfounded, seeing how Rudius is calmly conversing with him and not freaking out in fear, but Rudius explains that it would be rude to fear someone who saved his life. Introducing himself as Rudius, he learns that the Superd's name is Ruger, and that he only found them together with Eris, with no Kislane anywhere in sight. Wondering how they got here, Rudius explains that they got caught up in a mana disaster on the central continent. Hearing that, Ruger promises that he will escort them back home, as he would never abandon children in need. At that moment, Eris wakes up and screams in shock upon spotting Ruger. Seeing that, Ruger points out to Rudius that this is a more usual reaction when someone meets him, so him being so calm about it is quite abnormal, but in a good way. It does not take long for Eris to calm down when she realizes that Ruger means her no harm, and she wonders why her mother frightened her with all the scary stories about the Superd. As a matter of fact, Eris and Ruger start getting along quite well rather quickly. When the morning comes, the three of them start their journey across the demon continent, with Ruger leading them across the unforgiving wasteland. Water is not a problem for them since Rudius can create it with his magic, but they rely on Ruger to hunt for food. He does not want to put them close to danger, but Eris and Rudius insist that they can help out as well. After some time, they arrive at a Migard village. The guard is reluctant from letting them in, but Ruger will not take a no for an answer, so the chief of the village is summoned. When the chief comes forward, they start talking, and Rudius is grateful for learning the demon god language, as that helps him communicate with those who do not speak the human tongue. The chief recognizes the necklace hanging around Rudius' neck, as it is one of his tribe. Rudius explains that Roxy is the one who gave it to him and is surprised to learn that this is in fact Roxy's hometown, as the guard yells out in shock after hearing her name. As it turns out, Roxy is his daughter. Rudius also learns that the Migard tribe is very long-lived, as despite her young appearance, Roxy is about 44 years old. She left her hometown nearly 20 years ago, and they have not heard a word from her since, so getting any news of her well-being is a very welcome change. Arriving at the village chief's house, they start talking about how Ruger plans to bring them back home, as he is unable to enter cities. But even so, Ruger does not want to abandon them and states how he will put down anyone who stands on their path if need be. The chief reminds him that this approach will make it hard for him to accomplish his goal. Wondering what his goal is, Rudius inquires about it and learns how Ruger wants to change the bad reputation of the Superd race. Going into detail, Ruger explains how they were tricked by Laplace. He gave them powerful weapons which cursed them and made them turn on their fellow allies during the war, eventually even going after their own friends, family, and loved ones. None of them noticed that change in their mentality until it was too late. His own son gave his life to save him from the curse, and now he is using his son's spear, determined to fix the broken reputation that is left behind. Hearing that story, Rudius cannot help but empathize, thinking about how Ruger suffered on his own for hundreds of years. Because of that, he decides to give Ruger a hand and do what he can to help him on his mission. Before they leave on the following day, Roxy's parents come to give them some parting gifts as repayment for bringing news of her daughter to them. A very fine sword, which is perfect for Eris, and some of the demon continent currency. After more exhausting travels, they manage to reach their first big city, Rikarisu, Approaching the gates, they notice that security is tight as they are on the lookout for Dead End. Hearing that, Rudius wonders who or what Dead End is. Ruijerd reveals that this is in fact him, as this is a nickname he is known by in some places. In order to avoid trouble and help Ruijerd with his reputation, Rudius comes up with a sneaky plan masking the color of Ruijerd's hair and giving him Rox's necklace. Thanks to that, he appears to be just another member of the Mage tribe. The disguise works flawlessly, and they are able to enter the city without any issues. Rudius decides to bring them to the Adventurers Guild so they can become adventurers and start earning some money, as they will need quite a bit to make it back home. In addition to that, they can work on improving his reputation. To that end, Rudius decides to name their adventuring group Dead End and introduce the disguised Ruijerd as the scary supert everyone fears. But instead of fearing him, the adventurers of the guild burst out laughing and start making fun of them, pointing out that the supert had green hair. Considering that a good start, they take their leave and call it a day. Although Ruijerd is unsure about the idea, he cannot argue the fact that everyone laughed when they heard Dead End instead of running in fear, so it was a good start to create a more positive reaction attached to that name. While booking a room at the local inn, they run into another group of demon children who have formed their own adventuring group. They approach Eris, but she does not understand demon god, so an argument breaks out. Rudius steps in and diffuses the situation by pulling Eris away and healing the injuries she inflicted upon them. Seeing how he can use healing magic, they want to recruit him and Eris to join their group, but Rudius explains that they are already a group called Dead End, and that Ruijerd is also with them. Surprised to hear that, the demons still remember to introduce themselves as Bachiro, Gablin, and Kurt and wish Rudius all the best. Thinking on how to improve their financial situation, Rudius hits a wall as they can only take the lowest ranked jobs since they are new adventurers, and those jobs do not pay well. The moment he falls asleep, he has another dream with the man god in it. The man god tells him to take the job to find a lost kitten, as it will take care of all of his worries, hoping that Rudius trusts him now a bit more, considering his advice was correct before. Waking up from the dream, Rudius finds Eris awake. She cannot sleep as she keeps thinking if they will ever make it back home and if everyone back home is safe. Rudius reassures her that everything will work out and stays by her side, reinforcing his determination to make sure she gets back home safely. The next day, they take the job from Rudius' dream and go searching for the lost cat. Using Ruijerd's third eye, which is in fact the gem on his forehead, they are able to easily track it down into a nearby cave. There they find a lot of various beasts trapped in cages. Hearing voices of someone approaching, they set a trap and jump on them once they get close. Working together, they quickly ensnare them in Rudius magic. But the moment Rudius steps forward to interrogate their leader, the demon manages to break free and send Rudius flying across the room with a kick. Before Rudius can recompose himself, the demon gets decapitated by Ruijerd. Rudius questions why he did that, but Ruijerd does not understand as the demon was obviously evil, and he hurt a child. Rudius tries to explain that such actions will only work to worsen his reputation, but Ruijerd does not understand his reasoning as evil must be punished. Regardless of that, Rudius wants Ruijerd to stop killing people. From their conversation, the remaining two demons pick up that Ruijerd is of the Super Tribe, and they start begging for their life. Rudius uses that chance to question them and learns that they are in fact adventurers who have kidnapped animals and then fiend finding them when someone posted a job about it in the guild. Deciding to use that for their benefit, Rudius decides to strike a deal with them. They will keep what they found here a secret if they pick up higher ranked jobs for them in the guild and then trade jobs. Knowing that this is against the rules, the demons are a bit reluctant, but they see that they have no other alternative, so they accept the proposal. Ruijerd gets extremely upset when he hears the plan, and he questions Rudius as to why he wants to align himself with villains. Seeing how Ruijerd is behaving towards Rudius gets Eris upset in return, and she attacks Ruijerd. Kicking and screaming at him to stop being so stubborn, telling him how Rudius is doing all of this for their benefit, and if he cannot see that he should go and leave the two of them alone. Seeing Eris' reaction, Ruijerd backs down and tells them that he will never go back on his word and make sure that they get back home safely, no matter what. Returning to the guild, Rudius explains to the demons exactly what to do from here on out, but just as they are about to part ways, a horse-faced demon walks out of the guild and spots them. The demons recognize him as Nokopara as he butts into their business and wonders what they are doing together with the newbies. Once he sees that they are having a hard time explaining themselves, he brushes it off and leaves, laughing it all off. Roxy makes it to Ro, but all she finds there are a handful of survivors among the ruins of the city. It turns out the entire area got devastated by the mana disaster. She makes haste for the wall where names of all the casualties and still missing people are. After thoroughly reading through it, she could not find Rudius or any members of his family on the list of the dead. Instead, she finds a notice left behind by Paul. In it, he explains that Norn is with him, but everyone else is still missing. He believes that Rudius will be able to make it back on his own, so he will focus his search for the others. He is also imploring any members of his former adventuring party as well as any acquaintances to help him in the search if they see this message and send any information they have to the Adventurers Guild in Millis as he will head there next. While checking out his message, Roxy happens upon a dwarf and an elf who also seem to be familiar with Paul. Meanwhile, Rudius is relieved that they will no longer have to worry about money as they have successfully traded jobs with the other group, but noticing that Rudius seems unhappy with the arrangement makes him feel uneasy. Upon arriving at the destination of their mission, they find out that 2 more adventuring groups are here on a similar hunting mission, one of which happens to be the young demons they met the other day at the inn. Realizing that they will most likely have to compete for the monster they are hunting, they decide to do it first come first served. But as soon as they split up, Rudius mentions that he is worried about the young demons, as they seem to be way over their head on this mission. To appease him, Rudius agrees with him and they decide to follow after them to make sure they do not get killed. Just as Rudius feared, they fail to notice that they are going straight into a monster's trap. Rudius wants to jump in and save them immediately, but Rudius stops him, telling him to wait for the perfect moment so they could maximize the impact of their rescue. But as they are waiting for that moment, one of the demons, Gablin, gets killed in an instant. Rudius is left paralyzed with his miscalculation, so Rudius and Eris jump in and save the day for Kurt and Bakshiro. The fight is over in an instant as the monsters stand no chance against them. After making sure that Kurt and Bakshiro are okay, Rudius directs his attention toward Rudius, questioning him why he valued their profit over the life of a child. Rudius does not have a good answer, but Kurt jumps in and stops Rudius, telling him that it is not Rudius' fault. After all, he was their leader, and he led them here without recognizing just how dangerous the mission truly is. Rudius acknowledges Kurt as a warrior and apologizes for treating him like a child. They escort Kurt and Bakshiro out of the dangerous territory and then return back to their mission, albeit with lowered spirits. Soon enough, they hear sounds of combat coming from nearby, and they realize that the other group must be engaged with the monster they are after. Rushing to their side, they want to try and save them, but all they find is one survivor still engaged in a losing battle against a Red Hood Cobra, an extremely powerful monster. This time, they do not wait and quickly engage the monster instead. It is a tough foe, but by working together, they are able to bring it down, and Rudius makes sure that none of them get hurt in the process. Unfortunately, by the time they finish the Red Hood Cobra, the final surviving member of the other adventuring group has already died. After gathering the materials from the slain foe, they return to the guild in solemn silence. But before they can enter the guild, they are intercepted by Nokopara. It turns out that he confronted the demons they traded jobs with and forced them to reveal their scheme. In order to stay silent, he wants half of their monthly earnings from here on out. Knowing that this is a lose-lose situation for them, Rudius becomes increasingly infuriated. All he wants is to make sure Eris comes back home safe and sound, and right now he is ready to use any means necessary to accomplish that goal, even if it means wiping out Nokopara together with this entire city. Just as he starts gathering mana in his staff, Rudius splashes water over his hair, washing off the blue color and revealing the green hue of his superd. This changes everything, and Nokopara immediately starts screaming and apologizing. Other demons around hear Nokopara screaming about Dead End and notice Rudius' green hair, which sends them into a panic. While everyone is running away from them, Rudius grabs Nokopara and makes it crystal clear to him that if he says anything to the guild which would cause their adventuring licenses to become revoked, he will hunt him down and kill him, no matter where he goes. The guards come running in response to the commotion, and Rudius runs away in a flash. Rudius and Eris go looking for him, and after he shakes off the guards outside of the city, he appears before them once again. He steps beside Rudius and apologizes for not recognizing how much was on his mind. It was back then when he was ready to kill Nokopara to protect Eris that he sensed his resolve. Because of that, he acknowledges Rudius as a warrior, stating how he understands that he was doing his best to try and come up with a solution that would benefit them all, while making sure to protect what is important to him. Rudius renews his vow to protect Rudius, even if he cannot restore his reputation, Bikashu, that is his way. Hearing that makes Rudius relieved, and he also repeats his promise to try and do his best to help him improve his reputation. With everything smoothed out between them, they shake hands and Eris joins in, not wanting to be left out of the conversation any longer. The following day, they return to their journey towards the central continent, but not before they get a shock from Rudius. It turns out he has shaved his head since he noticed how scared everyone had become at the sight of his green hair. To help him conceal his red gem, while also looking more stylish, Rudius gives him a headband which also matches with the ones he and Eris are wearing too. Thus, they become a group of adventurers with matching accessories.